Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. I never thought one evening at home, sipping tea while waiting for my husband to return, would lead me down a path that would change everything. But life has a way of throwing surprises at you when you least expect them. My name is Rachel. I'm 48 years old, married for nearly 25 years to a wonderful man named David. We have a comfortable life, one built on routine, shared memories, and a love that has matured over the years. David works as a senior manager at a reputable firm, and though he often brings stories from the office, I never paid much attention, until recently. It all started with an offhand comment he made at dinner. "You wouldn't believe the day I had," David said, loosening his tie as he sat across from me. "Ethan pulled off something incredible today. The whole office is still talking about it." I raised an eyebrow. Ethan. I'd heard his name before. He was one of David's closest colleagues, a younger man in his early 40s who had joined the company a few years back. David always spoke highly of him. Smart, ambitious, charming, and well-liked by everyone. "What happened?" I asked, curious. David leaned back, shaking his head in disbelief. He stood up to the regional director in the middle of a meeting, told him flat out that he was wrong about the new restructuring plan. And the crazy part? He had the numbers to back it up. He practically saved the department from a disaster. I sipped my tea, impressed. "That's bold." "It was more than bold," David said, admiration in his voice. "It was gutsy." No one else dared to speak up, but Ethan just laid it all out there. I have to say, I respect the guy even more now. I had never met Ethan in person, but hearing David talk about him with such enthusiasm piqued my curiosity. I pictured him as someone confident, unshaken, and sure of himself, a man who didn't hesitate to stand his ground. And that was the first time in all these years that I actually thought about one of David's colleagues beyond just a passing name in conversation. A week later, David and I attended a corporate event, a formal gathering held at a luxury venue downtown. It wasn't something I particularly looked forward to, but I knew it meant a lot to him for me to be there. I wore a deep blue dress, something elegant but understated, and as we walked into the ballroom, I felt the familiar mix of excitement and discomfort that came with being surrounded by so many unfamiliar faces. David introduced me to a few colleagues, exchanging pleasantries, and then suddenly, I found myself standing in front of Ethan. "Rachel, meet Ethan." "Ethan, this is my wife," David said with a smile. Ethan turned to me, and for a brief moment, I felt something unexpected. A subtle, almost magnetic energy in the way he looked at me. His dark eyes held a warmth that was both inviting and disarming. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Rachel," he said smoothly, extending his hand. His voice was calm, steady, and filled with a quiet confidence that made me acutely aware of myself. I shook his hand, feeling the warmth of his palm against mine, and for a split second, it lingered. "The pleasure is mine," I said, hoping my voice didn't betray the sudden awareness I felt. As the evening progressed, I found myself drawn into conversations where Ethan was present. He was charming but not overbearing, intelligent without being arrogant. And what struck me the most was his attentiveness. How he truly listened when I spoke, how his responses felt genuine rather than polite small talk. At one point, David was pulled into a discussion across the room, leaving me momentarily alone with Ethan. "You don't seem like someone who enjoys these corporate events," he said with a knowing smile. I laughed softly. "That obvious, huh?" He nodded. "I get it. They can be exhausting. But I will say, your presence here means a lot to David. He talks about you often." Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten, not in an uncomfortable way, but in a way that made me feel seen. "He does?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. "Of course," Ethan said. "The way he speaks about you, it's clear how much he loves and admires you." I should have felt flattered, maybe even moved, but there was something deeper beneath his words, a layer I couldn't quite put my finger on. A strange tension hummed between us, not inappropriate, not wrong, but undeniably present. I forced a smile and changed the subject, not allowing myself to linger on the feeling. But even as the night went on, I couldn't shake the awareness. The way his eyes seemed to find me in the room, the subtle shift in energy whenever we were near each other. The following week, something happened that brought all those lingering thoughts to the surface. David had forgotten an important file at home, something he needed for a morning meeting. Since I had some free time, I offered to drop it off at his office. It wasn't unusual. I had been to his workplace before, but I had never stayed long. When I arrived, the office was buzzing with morning activity. I walked past cubicles and conference rooms until I reached David's department. As I handed the file to his assistant, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Rachel." I turned and found myself face to face with Ethan. There it was again, that shift in the air, the sudden awareness. He wasn't in a suit like the night of the event, just a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking effortlessly composed. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said, his expression warm but tinged with something else. "I was just dropping off something for David," I replied, trying to keep my voice light. He studied me for a moment before gesturing toward the nearby coffee machine. "You have a minute?" I was just about to grab some coffee. I hesitated. I should have said no. I should have smiled politely and left. But instead, I nodded. "Sure." We stepped into a quieter corner of the office, where the sound of conversations and ringing phones faded into the background. Ethan handed me a cup, and as I took a sip, I felt his gaze on me. "I meant what I said at the event," he said after a moment. I looked up, confused. "About what?" "About David loving you," he said, then paused before adding, "But I also meant that you don't seem like someone who's seen the way you deserve to be seen." The words landed with a weight I wasn't prepared for. I should have been offended. I should have shut it down right then and there. But instead, my heart pounded in my chest, because deep down, I knew exactly what he meant. And that was the moment everything changed. For a moment, I just stood there, the coffee cup warming my hands, while his words sent a different kind of warmth through me, one that made my heart race. I wasn't sure what to say. My instinct told me to brush it off, to pretend I hadn't caught the meaning behind his words. But something in Ethan's expression, something raw, something honest, made it impossible to ignore. I swallowed hard and forced a small laugh. That's a bold thing to say. Ethan tilted his head slightly, studying me. "Is it?" I let out a slow breath. "David and I have been together for 25 years. Of course, if he sees me." He nodded, but there was something knowing in his eyes. "I don't mean in the way a husband sees a wife out of love and routine. I mean, truly sees you, the person you are now, not just the woman he married decades ago." His words felt like a quiet storm rolling in, unsettling everything I had carefully placed in order. And the truth was, I wasn't sure if I had an answer. For years, my marriage had been steady, comfortable, safe. But Ethan's question made me realize how rarely I thought about whether I still felt, noticed, desired, not just loved, but deeply understood. And the fact that it was him asking, that he had seen it, somehow, in a way I hadn't even admitted to myself, made my pulse quicken. "I should go," I said finally, my voice quieter than I intended. Ethan didn't stop me. He simply nodded, as if he knew that I needed to walk away, but also that I'd be thinking about this conversation long after I left. And he was right. That evening, I went about my usual routine, cooking dinner, setting the table, listening to David talk about his day. But my mind kept replaying the moment in the office, the way Ethan had looked at me, the quiet intensity in his voice. I felt guilty for thinking about it, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore the realization his words had sparked in me. That night, as I lay in bed beside my husband, I found myself staring at the ceiling, wide awake. David stirred slightly, turning toward me. "You okay?" he mumbled, half asleep. "Yeah," I whispered, just thinking. He made a small noise of acknowledgement before drifting back into sleep, unaware of the thoughts racing through my mind. Over the next few days, I tried to push the moment with Ethan aside, but life, as it often does, had other plans. David had another late-night meeting, and instead of going home alone, I decided to stop by the cafe near his office, one of my favorite places to sit and unwind. It was quieter in the evenings, the soft hum of conversations mixing with the smell of coffee and warm pastries. I had just settled into a corner booth when I heard a familiar voice. Rachel. I looked up, my breath catching slightly. Ethan stood there, a takeaway cup in his hand, looking surprised but pleased to see me. "What are the odds?" I said, managing a small smile. He chuckled. "Either fate, or just the reality of working too late and needing caffeine." He gestured toward the empty seat across from me. "Mind if I sit?" I hesitated, but only for a second. "Sure." He sat down, setting his cup on the table. "How have you been?" I shrugged, stirring my tea absent-mindedly. "Busy. The usual." Ethan watched me for a moment before leaning slightly forward. "And how are you really?" Something in the way he asked made me feel like he already knew the answer. I let out a small breath, glancing out the window as I spoke. "I don't know. I guess I've just been thinking." "About what?" I hesitated, but then the words just came out. "About what you said in the office." Ethan didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked like he had been expecting me to say that. And I met his gaze, and for the first time, I said it out loud. "I don't know if I've been truly seen in a long time." The words hung between us, heavy and real. Ethan's expression softened. "That's not something you should have to wonder about, Rachel." I swallowed, feeling a lump in my throat. "It's not that David doesn't love me," I added quickly. "I know he does. We've built a life together, a family, memories. But somewhere along the way, I think I became more of a fixture in his world rather than someone he really notices." Ethan didn't rush to respond. Instead, he let the words settle before speaking. "I think that happens to a lot of people," he said gently. "But it doesn't mean you have to accept it." I looked down at my hands, my heart pounding. I shouldn't be having this conversation. I shouldn't be feeling this. But I did. I took a deep breath, forcing a small smile. "You ask a lot of dangerous questions, Ethan." He smiled, but there was something serious in his eyes. "I don't think they're dangerous. I think they're necessary." I glanced at the time and realized how late it had gotten. "I should go?" Ethan nodded, but didn't move right away. He just watched me, as if trying to read something in my expression. "Take care, Rachel," he said finally. I nodded, grabbed my bag, and walked out into the night air. But as I drove home, my hands gripping the wheel, I knew something had shifted. Ethan had given voice to something I hadn't even admitted to myself. And now that it was out in the open, I wasn't sure if I could ignore it anymore. The night air was cool against my skin as I drove home, but inside I felt warm, almost feverish. My thoughts swirled, tangled in emotions I wasn't ready to name. I told myself that Ethan was just a colleague, a kind man, a friend who had simply asked the right questions at the right time. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the whole truth. There was something about the way he looked at me, the way he listened, truly listened, in a way that felt rare. It made me realize how long it had been since I had felt that kind of attention. And now I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next day at the office, I told myself I'd act normal, that I'd put last night behind me. I lasted all of 20 minutes. Because the moment I saw Ethan by the break room, his sleeves rolled up, a coffee in hand, my stomach tightened. He wasn't doing anything special, just standing there, talking to another coworker, but my body reacted before my brain could remind me to be rational. He glanced up, caught my eye, and there it was again. That quiet intensity, that silent question in his gaze. I quickly looked away and hurried to my desk, willing my heart to slow down. I needed distance. And yet, later that afternoon, I found myself walking toward his office, a file in hand, an excuse, a reason to talk to him. I knocked lightly, and he looked up from his computer. Rachel. His voice was warm, almost expectant. I hesitated, gripping the file a little too tightly. I have those reports you needed. A slow smile tugged at his lips, as if he saw right through me. Come in. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. The office was quiet, the faint hum of the city outside the window the only sound between us. Ethan leaned back in his chair, watching me. Is that really why you came? I opened my mouth to say yes, but the words didn't come out. Instead, I exhaled and sank into the chair across from him. I don't know why I'm here, I admitted. He studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. I think you do. The air between us was thick with unspoken words. I could feel my pulse in my throat, a steady drumbeat against the silence. I don't know what this is, I finally whispered. Ethan leaned forward slightly. It doesn't have to be anything. Not if you don't want it to be. And yet, it already was. The way I felt around him, the way my heart raced, the way my thoughts lingered on him long after I left his presence, it was something. A something that scared me. I'm married, Ethan. He nodded, his gaze never leaving mine. I know. I let out a shaky breath. Then why does this feel like a line I'm about to cross? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because maybe it's a line that needed to be noticed before it was crossed. I swallowed hard. What does that even mean? He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his desk. It means maybe this isn't about me. Maybe it's about you finally seeing what's been missing. His words struck something deep inside me. Because he was right. This wasn't about Ethan. It was about me. For so long, I had moved through my life without questioning, without feeling the way I was feeling now. I had been comfortable, but comfort wasn't the same as being fulfilled. And now, I couldn't unsee it. I stood abruptly. I should go. Ethan didn't try to stop me. He just nodded, his expression unreadable. Take care, Rachel. I turned and walked out of his office, my heart pounding. But even as I left, I knew the moment wasn't over. Something had been set into motion. and there was no turning back. The weight of what had happened, or rather, what had almost happened, settled over me like a thick fog. I spent the rest of the afternoon avoiding Ethan, throwing myself into work, answering emails with unnecessary enthusiasm, and engaging in small talk I didn't care about. Anything to drown out the racing thoughts in my head. But the thing about unspoken truths is that they don't stay silent for long. By the time I drove home, I felt exhausted in a way I hadn't in years, not just physically, but emotionally. The weight of realization sat heavy in my chest. I wasn't just questioning my marriage. I was questioning myself. That night, I sat across from Mark at the dinner table. The room was quiet, aside from the soft clinking of silverware against our plates. We had lived in this house for 20 years, shared thousands of meals, and yet, for the first time in a long time, it felt like I was sitting across from a stranger. "Long day?" Mark asked, barely looking up from his plate. I hesitated, my fingers tightening around my fork. "Yeah, you?" He shrugged. "Same as usual." Same as usual. It was such an innocent phrase, but in that moment it devastated me. Because I realized that was exactly what our marriage had become, usual. A predictable rhythm of days blending into nights, conversations that skimmed the surface but never dug deep enough to touch anything real. I set my fork down. "Mark." He finally looked up. I took a slow breath. "Are you happy?" He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you happy? With us? With this life?" Mark blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Where is this coming from?" "I don't know," I admitted. I feel like we've stopped seeing each other." His jaw tightened, and for a moment I thought he was going to dismiss it, brush past the question like he often did. But then something in his expression softened. "I guess I thought this is what happens after a certain point," he said quietly. "You get comfortable. You build a life. You stop chasing something new because you think you've already found it." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "And do you think that's enough?" Mark was silent for a long time. Then he sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "Rachel, is there something you're trying to tell me?" I hesitated. This was my moment, the moment to confess everything.